Well folks, welcome to the last video in the series where we are going to put the hinges onto our little jewellery box and set the ruby into the lid, and I guess the little box will look pretty much something like this when it's done. The next job on our little jewellery box is to create the hinges. Okay, the first thing you've got to do really is to measure the space where the catch is going to go, which is here, and then to measure the space where the two hinges are going to go, which is just here. And we just transfer quickly to the page, and you can see here, so I've measured this, and I'm saying a 2 and a 3 makes a 5, and 5 wide, and this hinge is probably going to be decorative, so it will probably have some fluting or something like that on it, and I haven't quite decided what to do with that yet. Well, let's just get the making of the hinge out of the way. Now, the two hinges at the back, they're going to be 3.5mm by 3mm, which is 1.5 for each section. So that translates, if I'm going to use a 0.8mm wire, let's just write that on, 0.8mm wire, then I know from past experiments, and if you look at our other video on how to make miniature hinges, I'm going to need a pin tab that's 3.5mm, and we need to add 0.5mm for the slotting. But you'll see when we make the hinge, you'll see how that comes out. 3mm, 1.5 each there, and then we've got 3.5, which is 4 here and here. That gives me 3.5 by 11. And then if we look at the other one, we've got 2 and a 3, 2 and a 3, and then 3.5 plus half is 4 just here. So that gives us a 5 by 13. So if we measure that off on my silver, this silver is 0.3 millimeters thick, and so we measure that up, and we've cut the pieces off. We're now going to measure these sections, and then we're going to do the crossways parts which form the hinge, and I'll show you some of that as we go along. Okay, so we've covered the pieces in engineer's blue. This is a very technical felt tip pen made of blue. And we've measured them off as we just said that we would on the diagram, and then we've measured here. You can just see here we've put the little measurements for the cross struts. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to scribe a straight line down here. I don't know if I can get this on camera because it is really small, but we're going to scribe a straight down here, and effectively the tab measurements that come out go right from one side to the other. What that effectively means is that when you cut here and then flip round, and if you look at the hinge video that we did, you can see how that works. The two sides will match, and that makes you a much easier hinge. So what I've got to do is find a way to hold this down while I'm scribing it, and as you can see, that's actually pretty difficult, so I'm going to maybe try and use this felt tip pen. I don't know if that'll work or not, but it is very fine. So you can kind of see where we're going with this. Okay, so now we've got our hinges, and the shaded areas here, the areas that are going to be cut away to make the pin tabs. Okay, and this is just done with a scribe here. It's not particularly difficult to do. They are opposites, so that's shaded but that's not, that's shaded but that's not, and so on. This now needs to be cut with the nail scissors, and I'll show you a little bit of that. I won't show you the whole thing. Essentially this little hooky tool here, you see, this has got something like a 20-degree rake on it, and it's been made in it like a bird's beak shape. And what this is for is this is for scoring, so that you can fold silver, but also you can use scoring to snap silver in the right places. So essentially you can see just here it's been scored, and also in the other places where there are inside tabs that you can't get to, just here and just here, they've been scored too. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it's been snipped away with the nail scissors, and you can kind of see there you've got access to this one to cut this off, which is not a problem, and this one needs to be snapped off. So I'm going to try and do that on camera. I don't know if it'll work because it's quite a tricky thing to do. So you can see here where we've cut one of the side ones off. We've left the other one on just now, just for a demo. Let's just see if I can do this snapping on the camera. This is quite a difficult thing. Right, so you basically pull the tweezers in there, and if you work it backwards and forwards, I know it's out of focus a little bit, but it's a very shallow depth of field. So you can see there how it's snapped off where we use the scoring tool. And that's essentially how you proceed to finish the whole lot. It might be possible to do a little bit of the cutting on camera. So the tabs are cut by putting the nail scissors onto the tab like so. And I'm kind of surprised that tool makers have never come up with fine silver shears like these. But often you find that people who make tools don't actually do that kind of work, and so they don't really understand what people need. Okay, so you can see now that after we've done all that, we're in a bit of disarray. So what you essentially do is get your silversmith's flat pliers here, and you're just going to squash these out so they're flat. First thing you'll notice when you do that is that they're not quite as straight as they should be, and that's not difficult to rectify. To rectify the straightness, you can see there that the edge of your silversmith's pliers is considerably thinner than the tine, so you can put them this way on, right at the very edge, and then get them straight. Very hard to show that on camera. Okay, so this is the next stage in the process where you effectively use the silversmith's pliers to curl the silver around. So it's quite difficult to show this on camera, but essentially you can get the general idea. That's kind of how you do it. The next stage after that then is to use the 0.8mm wire, which we've got here, and then you use the pliers to roll these tabs over the wire. And again, that's very difficult to show, so I'll show you it when it's done, but generally speaking, what you do is you put the wire under like that, and then you use the pliers to push it over. After the hinge pin tabs have been rolled over the brass pin, this is what they look like. Okay, this is what they look like when they've been prepared for solder. You can just see the residue, white residue there. This is flux, which has been put under the crack there, where the fold is. And these little beige areas, this is hard silver solder paste. Okay, and these will now be soldered, and the next step will then be to cut them and try and match them and get them to fit. Okay, these are the finished soldered pieces. So it's worth checking. You can see how you've got a nice nub of solder there under the crack there, which holds the tab on, stops it getting peeled off when you open the box. It's worth checking that that's all been done properly. Check that the pin fits into all of the tabs that have been curled over, so that you're ready to go with the hinge. And so the next process will be to cut the hinge here. So here we have our little hinges that are ready to go. This one's already been formed onto the 0.8mm wire. These ones have been cut. If you remember the original drawings, these ones are cut to 1.5 tab size in millimeters, that is. And then with a very small amount of filing, quick shot of the file there, like that, we can put these together pretty easily, and they should be a good match if you measured them the way that I told you to measure them. And this is the little hinge that we made, and it's going to sit just there, and the other one's going to sit just there. And on the front we're going to have a catch, a hinged catch, which is going to go into here. Okay, you can see we've done a little bit of shaping of these hinges, so they're now quite a more attractive shape for a little box. You can see here, this is the catch, and it's got a hole drilled in it for the catch, and only that side's going to be soldered on this one. So that will be where the catch sits. So that's what the catch looks like, and it may need a little bit of adjustment, but that's pretty much where it's going to be. So on the back of the box we should have two hinges like this. And that's what they're going to look like when they're on. Okay, so here's the hinges prepared for soldering. you've got to be very careful to line up the hinges. You can see there they've just been tacked on with solder paste. So the line on the box edge, you can see there, needs to go through the centre of the place where the hinge pin sits. So essentially it cuts it in half, that line. And that's how your hinge lines up. If you do it anywhere else, it might work, but you may struggle to get it to work. Okay, so this is now the back of our little jewellery box. If you look here, the hinges have been soldered on one side. This is why I'm going to show you this, because this is a technique for getting the hinges exactly in the right place. So what you do is you put a bit of flux, but you limit the distance to which the flux can go to about halfway, because the flux causes the solder to flow. And then you push the hinges down, you make sure you've got them settled so they're nice and flat, and then you put a small amount of solder here, which I'll kind of show you. You've got to be careful not to put too much. You only put enough so that it can go under about halfway and it tacks the hinge on. And then we use another technique to get the solder into the other side, because once that's tacked on you can pull the pins out. Okay, so you can see how that's been done now. So there's the solder paste applied, and you can see the amounts are very, very small. These brass pins that are through the hinges at the moment, you don't want those to be too long, otherwise they'll sink the heat when you're trying to heat this up. So one last job to do on the construction of the box, and that is essentially this little catch tab here. So to get the catch pin in exactly the right place, this was drilled with a 1mm drill. You essentially close the box and close the catch, and this is a hand drill by the way, and you hand drill the hole, and then you can put a 1mm piece of silver wire in there. You may need to widen this hole very, very slightly so that it's a good close fit. And we're also going to put a little thumbnail tab on here, and that'll be the end of the construction. Okay, so there's my silver wire inserted into the hole, and that's been prepared with a bit of flux, which is what the white stuff is there, and that's now going to be soldered on. So I'm just going to give you a quick demo on how to prepare silver wire. So as you can see, when you cut with a cutter like this, the other side of the wire ends up that shape, which is the wrong shape really. You don't want to do that. If you want to insert that into a 1mm silver hole, and this is 1mm silver wire, then what will happen is that end of the wire there is distorted by the pliers. So to get rid of the distortion, firstly you have to flush cut it, and I'll just see if we can bring that into deep focus so you can see when you flush cut it, it's got a nice flat surface on it. And then what you've got to do is take off any distortion on the end of the wire by filing it very flat with a file like so, and then go around the edges too, and that will make the end of your silver wire as accurate to 1mm as possible, with low distortion from the squeezing of the pliers, if you like. So this has now been soldered on, and you can see that it's starting to catch, but it's not going to go fully right down. Now the reason for that is because it's too tall, and so you have to have this piece of silver large enough that you can actually handle it to get it through the hole, etc. And so what you do is you clip it off after you've soldered it, and that's how you do it. Okay, well, this is our little silver box now. It's come out of the silver pickle. We have to push the tines down on the ruby just yet. This box is now going to go into a silver hardening cycle in the kiln, just to make sure it's nice and springy. So there we have a very nice flower set ruby jewellery box for a doll's house, which is a superb little item. And this will now go off for hallmarking to the hallmarking centre. So it works perfectly. Look at that, and the catch comes down and everything. There you go. Absolutely beautiful little item. Well, that brings us to the end of this little video. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Bye.